Yeah, so if I can give a bit of context to how this panel was put together, we are the project leads on 3 projects. One is the Movable Village. The other one is Slice, which is a farm to fork robo cafe. And the last project is Project Shia, which deals with resources. So Nihao and I are co-leads on Movable Village. But for the sake of this discussion, I'll be the facilitator and he will be representing the project. Yang En is the lead on Slice and Ritika is the lead on Project Shia. So just a little bit of our backgrounds. Me, Nihao, and Ritika studied architecture. I studied in Singapore and Nihao studied in the UK and Ritika also studied in Singapore. And Ritika has a specialization in environmental systems. Yeah, and Yang En himself studied economics in the UK. So engaging in this panel, we're trying to look into the city design from a resource and urban design point of view. Yeah. So just now with the panel that Taizo and Atsushi and Tailing had, I think that there are a lot of insights into city systems that are required for us to flourish. Like we talk about healthcare, we talk about decentralization, trade, economics. Yeah, but in our seed projects in Audacity, we have a series of hypotheses regarding how we live and how we move into the future from a actionable point of view. So we test hypotheses in the projects. Yeah, that's how we chose to put together this panel for you guys. Yeah, maybe we can start with Yang En to describe a little bit on Slice while we wait for Ritika to come in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shui. So hi, everyone. My name is Yang En, and I'm actually one of the project co-leads for Slice. So in short, basically, Slice is an experimental food lab that supports innovative solutions across the full value chain of food and agriculture. So we're talking about from food production to food consumption and also food waste recycling, right? So for our team, we have a vision of a future food system that is farm to fork, is decentralized, where people are able to grow where they consume, and that every community will be eventually self-sufficient in their food supply. So currently we are experimenting with many ideas, from incorporating alternative protein in our local dishes, comfort food, ways to enable human autonomy through robotics and automation, and also various ways to upcycle food waste. So if anyone wants to find out more, you can do so in our Slice booth at the expo section on the event page.
Yeah, thank you, Yang En. Anyhow, maybe you can share a little bit on Movable Village.
Yeah, thank you for the intro. So the Moodle Village is a growing experiment for alternative modes of living enabled by communal sensibilities and technologies. So the objective with our project is to showcase experimental solutions and expand the way we engage with our built environment, prioritizing human autonomy and wellness, as well as sustainability, like the values that Ashish-san mentioned in the introduction. And through test bedding, we believe we can uncover synergies between various methods and technologies and develop new ecosystems that, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if Ritika is able to come in, but maybe I can share a little bit on Project Shia. So how Project Shia really began was to look into a civilization kit that was used to kickstart humanity. So imagine if the world was in some apocalyptic scenario, what would be the minimum viable product for civilization to kickstart itself and for us to thrive? Yeah, but now it's kind of shifted into how we can redesign a humanity-centric sharing community with a smaller footprint that is resource efficient and doesn't compromise modern comforts enabled by innovative technology. So Project Shia comes from the word of share. Yeah, so sharing to sustain. So Project Shia is actually a collaboration between Ecolabs and Audacity, and Ecolabs is fundamentally looking into resources and environmental systems, circular systems, etc., resource systems. Yeah. So maybe if I ask, just open the question to the floor, like what are some ways that you have witnessed that COVID has impacted the way that we live, work, and eat?
I think if you see things from kind of like a micro perspective, right? I think COVID has greatly impacted our food supply chain. We have seen like the capacity of food production has largely remained the same, but the food produced is not getting out because major supplier nations have actually begun imposing export controls, right? So such global supply chain disruptions really affect trade dependent cities like Singapore, because we're so highly reliant on food imports, right? From a micro perspective, I think Tsai Ling has mentioned in a previous panel as well, the COVID crisis actually brought out the ugliest side of people, as many people, began panic buying in supermarkets. And it just goes to show that right when the crisis strikes, the immediate instinct of people is just to ensure that they have enough food, right? So it shows how much we depend on our food system and how central food is in our daily lives, right? For us as human beings, we define ourselves through what we eat. The food we eat every day becomes who we are, literally, right? So clearly, food is a basic block of human sustenance. It's going to be a huge part in the new norm going forward. And I think without it, we cannot even talk about flourishing in other areas.
Actually, talking about flourishing, just as I heard the announcement of the lockdown, I actually rushed over to the micro factory and stocked up on all the paint and mobile working tools that I thought would be quite critical and a must-have in the house. So I think people in general are cultivating themselves more, indulging in craft and activities that would normally be considered a luxury. But at the same time, like Young-Eun mentioned, I think sustainability is no longer a luxury, but is becoming a real necessity. I think the idea of sustainability itself, when talking about food and food production and decentralized farming, itself is being more defined as self-sustainance. And I think sustenance not just with our food that has been discussed today, but also with our spaces and our daily habits. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we are all taking the opportunity in this COVID period to really critically analyze like how much we consume and how do we get our resources. Like for example, panic buying in the supermarket, in a way it can be seen as decentralization of resources, because when you panic buy, you are securing enough for your family and you're securing enough for your neighbors. Yeah. And because you are unable to make multiple trips to the supermarket and you cannot rely on city infrastructure, then you have to bring that infrastructure into your home. The same way that actually in this period, the people who have cars are very, very privileged. Yeah, because just by getting into a private hire vehicle, you're exposing yourself to unnecessary risk. Yeah. So people are really trying to see and starting to realize that like there are many things in life that we're taken for granted, and the city is a lot more fragile than we thought it was. Yeah. Like I think just now Taizo mentioned something about how we have to take back like our resources and we have to take back our skills. So the fact that we're looking into Nihao mentioning like bringing equipment into the house where we are unable to rely on external providers for resources. So I mean, do you think that this kind of behavioral shifts would stay in a post-COVID era?
Yeah, I think some of these behavioral shifts, like for example, even in the case of Singapore, right, we are shifting towards local food production more heavily, and we're doing so because of the 30 by 30 target. But I think we're expressing that even, right, because we really need to rely on local capabilities for our food production. And I think some people might consider Singapore lucky because we have strong alliances with our neighbors such as Australia and New Zealand to keep our supply chains intact. But I think this crisis as a whole is really a timely reminder for us to have that strong local capability in order for us to have sufficient buffer, especially in times of need, so that we can remain resilient in our food supply. And I think this will continue to happen. There'll be more grants, more support given to smaller startups that are willing to grow their own crops in many different spaces, encouraging citizens to actually take more ownership and initiative, grow your own movements. I think all this is really here to stay.
Yeah, I totally agree with Young. I think like going forward, I think self-sustainance will become the new aesthetic as more technologies that allow for a decentralized means of production will be developed and readily integrated to existing everyday household items, or become means of utilizing dead spaces. As like in front of our house, we've got a lot of space that is potentially we're able to grow and produce our own food. And with decentralized production, I think we'll begin to cultivate ourselves through nurturing. And this idea of like nurturing our spaces or our relationships and ourselves. So in terms of like a big mind shift, I think the value of growth itself will become core, and this itself will empower everyone individually and collectively. And I think that in itself will also create a shift that naturally leads us towards a model of shared economy that will be more sustainable because it's more natural and less top down. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the sharing economy really brings into the idea of resilience. Yeah, because in effect, like all these systems, they don't just work in silos. Yeah, like resource leads to food, that leads to trade, that leads to transport, and it leads to everything is intertwined. And the thing about having a resilient city is to not be fragile. Yeah, so that we are able to withstand and support communities to guide them to flourish. Yeah. Oh, Ritika is in. Hello.
Yay.
Welcome.
Hi,
in.
Ritika.
Okay. Maybe you start a little bit by talking about Project Shia and like what you guys have found about resources and living. We're talking about living and flourishing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for us, for Project Shia, we first went back to the drawing board and decided how do we design a human-centric sharing community, like Tyra-san had mentioned. What if we do that with a smaller footprint? What is resource efficiency? How do we get technology involved and still maintain modern comfort? So that's why we came up with a sharing community to sustain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in light of talking from a resource point of view, right, in the pre and like current and post-COVID era, do you see that there might be a change in how we are consuming our resources?
Yes, for sure. I'm sure all of our electricity bills will be through the roof after. So, and just going back to the fact that could we be self-sufficient in growing maybe one vegetable a day, and then that could go back to our extra produce being shared to a community. So we could look at that as maybe one way to start.
Yeah. So I think that the other thing about Project Shia is looking at the daily consumption of resources, right?
Yeah.
If we were able to integrate like external processes into the house, how do you think that might happen?
Actually, when we started the project, we thought energy would be our biggest constraint. And then when we looked at the water consumption in Singapore context, it's 140 liters a day that we all use, which is actually quite ridiculous. So we thought, okay, well, let's look at just tackling water first. And then we realized that if you have a very good water system, it goes back to how much energy it requires to clean the water. So all your resources, through this process, we realized that you have to look at all your resources being in tandem with each other.
Yeah. Oh, Yang, and the other time we were talking about future food systems, right? How do you think that they could be designed like differently?
Yeah, great question. I think first we have to see what are the current limitations of our food system. And I think one thing the virus has done, one good thing is that it has been very efficient in highlighting to us what are the strains in our systems, right? And we have seen the food industry come under immense pressure in order to meet our basic needs of food. And because of this pressure, there are certain cracks that start to show. And it really just shows how fragile our food system is, with supply chains being so easily disrupted. We see that many of our food systems actually lack the resilience and they lack the redundancy that's actually needed. And a main reason why is because a lot of places in the world, they are still heavily reliant on heavily centralized systems, right, at the expense of strong local food production systems. And because we are so interconnected, when something like COVID hits us, a supply shock, the links that we have, the networks, everything becomes broken. And all of us are caught unprepared. So I'm not trying to say that, importing food is a bad thing. I think we still definitely need to keep our import chains intact, but definitely moving towards decentralization will be essential, right? And I think one more limitation that we have seen so far is that a lot of people in today's population is not getting the right nourishment and the right nutrients that they need. Why? Because right now we're prioritizing a lot of cash crops, right? We're growing them. These are crops and food that are cheap calories, high yield, but so what if they manage to feed most people, right? These are the same ingredients that actually promote diseases like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure. And as we know by now, this group of people, this demographic, they definitely have weaker immune systems, and they're definitely more prone to getting the virus or even surviving them if they actually contracted it, right? So I think this whole crisis has shown that we definitely need to have greater access to cleaner and healthier food sources. And I would say moving forward, the kind of concepts that we should pursue will be greater decentralization in how we grow our own food. So that happens on multiple levels, like in communities, in homes, in offices, and at the same time, greater citizen empowerment and autonomy as well, right? People need to feel that, food security is not just a problem that the government needs to take care of, but it's something that, everyone, we should do our part, and we should come up, have these ideas supported so that we're able to contribute to a resilient food system.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that especially in this scenario with COVID, like when we do bulk buying, we also have to be conscious, or even just our simple groceries, like be conscious of what we are consuming and how we are building our own macronutrient profile. Yeah, I think that people have to be more sensible because options are not as readily available to each other anymore. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to jump into a question. Yeah. If we think that all these individual building blocks and they don't work in tandem, but they work in like symbiotically with each other, then I want to open a question to the table, to the panel. Like, what do you think that this symbiosis could look like in a systems point of view, or even in like a physical point of view? Yeah. How might we be able to integrate these systems in a way that makes it accessible to others and also makes it like a feasible like structure for us to adopt in the future? Yeah.
Okay, maybe I will start. No matter what the building blocks are, I think there will be always a shift between your basic resources. So the amount of land you require, water, space, energy, and as well as the integration with technology. Because sometimes we found solutions where the technology works very good on a community scale, but the space required for one person, there are no solutions like that. Just to give a simple example of earlier, we had, when you think of farming, you think land is perceived as the biggest constraint. But now we look at the age of hydroponics. So when you take soil out of the equation, water and nutrients become the next key resource. So as we make decisions for the future, we really need to focus on maybe decentralized renewable sources, which are universally accessible as well as cost effective. So maybe the new norm could be giving energy and water back to the grid instead of taking only from. So it will be a two-way system. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah. Right. I think it's great that you mentioned about the symbiosis between food and resources that are required. I actually have an idea of how food can actually be integrated in urban living. I think I'll just mention a bit on that. But I think if we kind of look at urban living, we first need to ask ourselves, how will it look like in future? Like, how is it moving towards? And I think a common thread that has come up in our projects that we've been doing at Audacity is that we admit that the lines between working and living will become increasingly blurred. Right? So one of the trends that I personally think will continue even after post-COVID is the reduced reliance on a physical office space. As most people are on already right now, they're on a work from home arrangement, right? And I think that this trend is going to be a lot more common because people just get used to working flexibly. They realize that, meeting face-to-face is no longer mandatory. They're able to achieve the same outcome with a video call, right, or through Zoom. So at the same time, while work from home can be productive because it saves time for us traveling to an office, I think it can also be a really stressful scenario because of the increased isolation and greater feelings of disconnection with our friends. And to preserve that kind of mental well-being and sanity, people start to get more in touch with themselves, right? They start to pursue more nourishing, fulfilling activities that are therapeutic to the body, the mind, the soul. And I think that's where food and agriculture can really play a huge role, right? For example, someone getting in touch with what they eat by preparing their own meals, taking care of their own nutrition and health needs. Maybe in the future, people will have more time to integrate urban farming into their daily lives, experimenting more with different recipes at home, right? So I think all in all, it's just something about staying at home and having that flexible working arrangements that make people more willing to experiment, more willing to get in touch with themselves and just focus on being and living. Yeah.
Actually, talking about the work culture, I think I think it will continue to become more feasible and to be able to work digitally and still maintain that efficiency at work. And I actually know a lot of my friends who are going out of the city into the suburban homes, and I think this in itself might provide opportunities for them that they haven't seen before. And so I think it could potentially lead to like a suburban revival. But I think in terms of like this idea of boundaries, one thing that's really become apparent with this whole thing is that issues are no longer perceived to be bordered and contained like within, you know, imaginary and national lines. So what we experience, what is experienced in like one location has and will continue to have, you know, repercussions across the oceans and around the world. And I think I'm quite hopeful that, you know, the future will be quite homogeneous in that way. And at home as well, talking a lot about self-sustainance and all of that thing, I think living spaces themselves will also evolve. It'll become, you know, as we mentioned, more self-sustaining as the environment becomes less able to provide the essentials such as food and clean water that we mentioned. And I think there will be a lot of focus actually on interior design to integrate sort of well-being and means of production into our lives. As we found these to be like, yeah, quite critical at this time. But more immediately now, I think, and this is thinking quite positively, I think that the spaces will move away from sort of a classical idea of successions, like specialized and segregated spaces that break our programs into, you know, like the serving and the served, or the day spaces, night spaces, and, you know, common and private. So in effect, our architecture in general will sort of, the architectural design will begin shifting towards facilitating and encouraging a more engaged, I think a more flexible and more active community as well. But of course, you can flip this the other way in quite a negative direction, and the COVID might impact us to become more extreme in the way that we protect ourselves and isolate ourselves, like Young mentioned.
Yeah. So I can see in the comments, people are talking about how, firstly, while remote working might be the new norm, yeah, there might be a need to implement remote working in a more structured way, as well as the fact that work from home is not a new concept, but it's just more widely adopted. And also even with online, it'll be good for people to have a chance to meet each other once in a while. And I definitely, I think we all agree with this sentiment. Yeah, the question is, moving on into the new norm, then how do we create and structure it? Because right now in COVID, a lot of things that we're doing is reactionary. But actually within the Audacity community, we had already been hypothesizing about all these things like much earlier on, like how do we build resilience? How do we foster connection? Yeah, while empowering humans through technology. Yeah. So I think that I want to really ask the panel, like, if you could imagine that future city, like especially with all the luxury that we've had with hypothesizing and also like talking about this, if you could look into that future like crystal ball, like what would it look like to you?
Okay, I'll share my ideal future of food in a resilient city, right? So my hypothesis, or what I would like to have or see in the future food system, is that, you know, food production will no longer be an occupation that people have, but a social activity, like a platform where different groups of people are able to come together freely to interact and participate in. So be it whether you're young or old, able or disabled, using technology, it will allow you to participate in urban farming. And people will share knowledge, they will share their resources, they will grow what they would like to eat. And if one day you feel bored and maybe you want to try like different varieties, they will go back to barter trade, exchange with one another in the community. And with these ingredients, you know, just really experiment with cooking, fermentation, and baking.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, even I would envision a future where it could be edible landscape, in a sense, where at a young age itself we're taught what goes into growing food. And just with that, you also lead to respecting the environment, reducing food waste, and all the other things that come with it. So yeah, because I only very recently got into gardening, and I didn't realize it was so much hard work.
Yeah.
But it's rewarding as well, right?
Sorry?
I mean, once you see the fruits of the labor,
you
realize it's very rewarding as well.
Sometimes we waste so much, and what's happening also internationally is a lot of the food is getting wasted because it's not getting exported. So we need to close nutrient cycles as well.
I think we get a true appreciation for what is given to us. I think especially the fact that farmers have been always like under the poverty line, and what we take for granted that like, oh, we can get like this one vegetable at just like 50 cents or $1, because actually we realize it takes so much effort and so much love and care Yeah, and this way I really hope that we can create more equitable like communities. Yeah, because we support manufacturers, craftsmen, and farmers. Yeah, and we realize that even in this situation, what is considered essential is actually not like the tech and like banking or like other like information jobs. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, but this has really been very grounding for us. So for me, I would hope that like in the future we are a lot more appreciative. Yeah, and we show more kindness to the people around us.
Yeah, I also think the way we think about land and efficiency of its use will also change in light of everything that we've been discussing. So as we're able to like decentralize work more and all of these means of production and become more self-sustaining, we may become like more sparsely populated, so decentralized living. And our ideas of efficiency will shift towards efficiency in achieving a balanced open ecosystem network rather than what it is currently, which is on efficiency of distributing resources.
Yeah. Okay, our time is up. So thank you guys so much. We think I'm glad you were finally able to join us. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, small hiccups. Yeah. Thanks for the amazing conversation, guys.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to Jeremy and Jen.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.